Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagano, and welcome back after an extended absence to Iowa's premier conservative podcast. Gentlemen.
The podcast was here.
The podcast was here,
and we
but
were
yours
here.
truly was not.
Yeah.
But we had a scintillating discussion, John, on trade policy.
We did, yeah.
As we've been promising people
Right.
for quite some time. So it was good to... Do you still feel satisfied that you had enough of an opportunity to speak your mind? Okay,
yeah.
good. All right. I did get feedback from the episode from folks that there were some that weren't quite all the way there with you.
Yeah.
And but that's fine. I said, John will get you there.
Yeah.
Just stay tuned. So, did you guys miss me?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you glad to be back? Oh gosh. Yeah. The complete indifference. Our listeners are expecting you to be excited.
Well,
Oh my
The
god.
silence again.
All right. I clearly didn't the warm-up act clearly wasn't good enough. Okay. So, what I do want to update, I have two good updates we need to bring out. One, we thought we were done with the landscaping updates, but we actually do have one.
Yeah.
So, as you pointed out, Chris, like we thought it was all done and then nothing, right?
We thought they were done, even if the project itself wasn't done.
Right.
A lot of cleanup, a lot of grass that needed to be planted or whatnot. And lo and behold, after however long they were gone, they showed up with the biggest army they've brought yet for this thing. And they were pulling weeds and digging up old sod and scraping a lot of dirt away. And we really thought we were getting somewhere.
Yeah.
But they're gone again. And
Well,
haven't come back,
so I was out of the office last week, but so they got this done, I don't know, a month or two ago, and have let it sit there in the summer sun to wilt.
Yeah, a lot of
And
that.
so now they actually were out there and the sprinklers were on today. So I thought that's pretty good. After 2 months of letting it sit there and die, they decided to water it. So
I don't think it gets to come back.
I think it's very much too late. But anyway, there's your update. But perhaps more exciting, John, the Hendrickson Library. We're one step closer to reality.
yes.
So I came in today, and there are just boxes and boxes and boxes full of presumably books.
Mm-hmm.
They are books.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, is this the cream of the crop? Is this or are these more the deep tracks that you brought in? Are these like the real?
A little bit of both.
Okay, so it's part of the core collection.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We did a rough count. There's 650 some books.
And this is just a fraction of the collection, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
What fraction of the collection is it?
A little over half.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Well, I've been trying to source bookshelves for the Hendrickson Library, John, and I think I found some, and I think I found a place to put the bookshelves. But if you're telling me there's a like amount that's not yet here, like I don't know where we're going to put more bookshelves.
But most likely, I won't bring the others in because the Hoover collection stays protected.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Good. Well, no, we don't want to put any of that at risk, John. Well,
That's right.
anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's just we're gonna get it done. So people want to know.
This will be the premier library for the study of conservatism in Iowa.
It's not just the study of conservatism; it is the study of Hendrickson conservatism.
That's right.
That's one of the things that we're trying to actually establish through this show. What is Hendrickson conservatism?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to continue working on it, and that represents more of the intellectual, background.
Yes.
For the folks that are going to come later, generations after us, that want to go in and actually explore what gave rise to the movement. And they'll be able to go in and actually read the original,
Yeah.
what gave rise to it. So,
I got more to say about that. I've been
Okay.
thinking. One, I appreciate folks listen and contemplate what we say, even to the extent when they want to disagree with us. But for offering our take, or in this case, John's personal take, I mean, that's part of being a think tank, because we put stuff out there. And you can think about it, right? It is a perspective. And again, you can disagree with John or not. I thought he sounded actually great. I came in and said, well, you really sound like you know what you're talking about, John. So, well done. But John's positions are, they're principled, and they're informed, they're researched, and he believes in them deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, like, you are more than welcome to disagree and everything else. But, I hope folks can at least respect, John's positions or how he arrived at them, because he clearly has thought through those things more than most people have.
correct. And it's also a part of your lived experience.
Yes.
You know, as seeing up close the impacts of trade policy on your community.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
I mean, I know that within our own team we have varying opinions to different degrees, how much we agree or disagree.
Yes.
But I don't think anybody feels as confident or as strongly in their positions as you do. So I assume if one of us feels as knowledgeable as John and wants to take that to the air, you'd give him the opportunity, Chris. But none of us quite are ready for that. So
okay. So we got a couple of different presidential things I want to hit on today. And since we're kind of on John and trade policy, here's another one that's got a foreign affairs component to it, John. So I saw this headline in NBC News. Now I know what my thought was when I saw this headline originally, and I want your take. Here's the headline: Vivek Ramaswamy suggests the United States may be aiding Ukraine because of Hunter Biden. What's your reaction to that headline, John?
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's why. It suggests, like, the audacity of someone to suggest that this is the perspective of NBC News. The audacity to suggest that maybe our policy is intertwined with the Hunter Biden corruption.
There's maybe an element to that, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that.
Was Vivek's take actually a little stronger than that headline implies? Was he just suggesting, and it may, or did the mainstream media kind of tone that down?
Here's the quote, okay?
Okay.
The purpose of the U.S. military is to advance American interests, to protect the homeland. Absolutely correct. Not to aimlessly fight some random war that's arguably a repayment for a private bribe that a family member of the United States received, $5 million from Burisma. Ramaswamy told a crowd of about 60 at a campaign event in Council Bluffs. So I think if I read this the right way, they're just aghast at the even suggestion that these things are related. And over at NBC News headquarters, they're just giggling like, oh, this the audacity, this is just silly to even think about it. Like, I mean, from my point of view, I kind of think the burden's on the Bidens to prove that they're not, but anyway, I thought it was absurd the way that headline was written, but maybe what it comes down to is, as a more serious note, that absolutely should be a valid question.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, most of the media is out here trying to pretend that the corruption didn't happen, that it had absolutely no ties to President Biden, and that the rest of us should just look away and we should be ridiculed for wanting any answers, which is what's going on here. Mm-hmm. We're going to ridicule a presidential candidate for suggesting that these things might be tied. Well, guess what? If you don't like the suggestion that these things are tied together, then do your job and go get some answers about what the whole story's about.
Yes.
Because then we wouldn't have to have these suggestions. We would just know. But sadly, we can't have anyone critically asking those questions in the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think.
Well, look at the double standard, too, when President Trump was in office and how the media always brought up the false narrative of collusion with Russia.
Right.
And now you have significant evidence of Hunter Biden and even the president being involved in these foreign dealings, and you're not even allowed to ask questions about it, and the media just tries to cover it up. There's a major double standard there.
Correct. Anything that might potentially harm the Biden administration is off limits.
Yes.
So, I mean, as long as we know,
just like the Clinton Foundation.
Correct. You're onto it. You got it. We've figured that out. Before we move on to our other, presidential thing that I wanted to talk about today, there was another piece of news yet this afternoon that really made me happy. So, in my years at serving in the legislature, there were several things that I really wanted to get done. And some of them I didn't. One of the things that I most wanted to do that I never got done was to demolish the Wallace Building, John. And today, the Executive Council authorized moving the folks whose offices are at the Wallace building out to, or they're going to buy a new building, the old McLeod building on 63rd and Park, out kind of towards the airport, if you're not familiar with the Des Moines area. So it got a great deal on the building. It's a nice space, much cheaper than building a new state office building. It seems like a great deal. If you're not familiar with the Capitol complex and the downtown Des Moines area, the Wallace building is the one you see often in a lot of pictures with the gold mirrored glass on the outside.
Yeah,
It's
like
really what?
Like my 8-year-old sunglasses.
Right. They're sort of like the old pair of 80s or 90s Oakleys that have been underneath the seat of your car for way too long. It's a really ugly building. It was poorly built from the outset. It is an occupational health hazard. It's full of asbestos. It's got mold. It leaks. It's been a money pit from day one, and we constantly try and fix this thing, and it's awful. It was awful from the outset, and it needs to go away. So, really good news. Now, what the Executive Council authorized today was the purchase of the building and moving out there, and as I understand it, leaving up to the legislature of what to do actually with the building. But
wasn't the thought that they could raise it and sell the lot?
Yep. And I imagine that the lot's worth a lot of money. I mean, you think about the area, the East Village. I personally would like the state to just raise it and add those to the Capitol complex grounds, save it. I mean, there's only so much real estate there. I guess I don't know what it's worth, but I'm a proponent of keeping the Capitol complex looking good in accordance with traditional architecture styles. You don't know what somebody might put up on that lot across the street, and do we want somebody put a Taco Bell up across the street? I mean, that might be great, but is that what you want to? Well, I should have used a better example than Taco Bell, but the point stands.
That you could choose to sell it to Taco Bell or Taco John's or anybody else you want. That you could live with, right? You say, well, this isn't so bad. Well, but then it's that. Who do they sell it to, right? Who becomes your neighbor there? So
yeah. So anyway, we'll stay tuned to that. But I was really happy to see real progress on that from the State Executive Council today. So the other piece of presidential campaign, I guess, stuff that I saw this week, and we had talked about trying to track where the presidential candidates are on fiscal issues, economic policy, tax policy. So Florida Governor Ron DeSantis released what he termed his Declaration of Economic Independence. And there was a fair amount of stuff in there, a lot of different issues. But we're not necessarily in the market for 100 pages of white papers here, but I think there were some significant pieces in there. John, did you take a look at this and see what's contained in here? Is there?
I did, yeah, and it's a fairly extensive, broad plan that he unveiled, I believe, in New Hampshire. He sets out a goal for the United States for 3% growth, which I think is good, and some of the common things that we'll probably hear from other candidates as they start to release their economic plans. For example, he calls for further regulatory reform of curbing burdensome regulations. He calls for certain tax relief and full expensing, and I think there will be a big issue with key provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They'll be expiring in 2025, and I think he addressed some of that. He also takes on, of course, and it's easy to say this, we need to cut spending and get spending under control, as well as have more stable Federal Reserve policies that lead to a strong dollar. Now, interesting that what got him some, his plan was both praised and sort of attacked by the Wall Street Journal editorial board, which was interesting. And I would say I'd credit the governor for basically wanting to limit immigration, along with strong borders. And of course, the Journal has long opposed that type of policy. But the other thing is that and a lot of candidates have been kind of struggling with this, going back to what we talked about, is trade policy. And certainly the governor, Governor DeSantis, talked about the rising trade deficits, which I thought was very good for him to mention, and also the need for trying to bring back key industry, especially from China. He also identified what he called using strategic tax abatements to encourage more domestic manufacturing, which
Are you familiar with that at the national level, John? I am not.
I have not heard that either.
This would be using, I believe, and again, the details are not there, but using tax incentives to encourage maybe key industries, maybe like semiconductors or something like that. And so the other thing is that the question I have on trade is there's, he brought up China, but what about the trade deficit is not just with China, it's with other countries. And so, where does he stand on tariffs? Does he want to continue the tariffs that the Trump administration put on China? Does he want to continue the steel and aluminum tariffs, or does he want to take those off? Those are some things I think that need to be answered in terms of trade. But overall, I'd say this is probably the most detailed economic plan we have yet seen from a candidate. I know President Trump has released some things as well on the economy, but this was a fairly significant speech, and so it has a lot of good things in there. I would say.
I agree. Some of these are things we've seen from Republican presidential candidates in the past, fighting reckless and wasteful federal spending. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Let's do that. I don't know that that's necessarily breaking new ground. Some of these things were considered a little out there not that long ago, like reining in the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. That's become more of a mainstream Republican position. Unleashing American energy independence, great. So there was in here on the DeSantis for President website, and I read this, which kind of caught my attention. I want to read this and see what you guys think. So the header is, "We seek to reverse the decline and restore American greatness." Great. Bullets. 1, we want to be a country that makes things. I think, John, you and I are absolutely on board with that. American manufacturing. We want to be a country where a family can raise children on a single income. That's a good thing, right? I mean, it goes to, wage growth and economic opportunity. And if a family chooses to try and do that, it's certainly an option. Here's the one I want your take on. We want to be a country that both inspires and demands loyalty from its elite. I'm not quite sure what that means, and I've read it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
John?
Well, I would take that to mean as, for a long time, for decades, this is my interpretation of it, is that he's referring to the elite as the corporate elite, and that whose interest has been basically what we'd call globalism. They have not been interested in the well-being of the American worker or the middle class. They've been more interested in their bottom line, and they have not really put America first. They've put their own corporation first. So their corporate headquarters may be here, but they're more interested in their overseas dealings. So I think they're when you look back and the early 20th century, the real titans of industry like Henry Ford and those individuals really were strong American nationalists. They believed that what was good for their worker was good for them. Ford wanted to pay his employees enough so they could even buy his product, so they could buy their Model T, and so you had a sense of patriotism that was with some of these business leaders. And I don't want to say that all corporate people aren't patriots, but I think when it comes down to issues of sovereignty and what we've seen for a lot of times is that the last several decades, corporate America has not been, the elites have not been. They've been with the Davos crowd of globalization that has not benefited the American worker. And when my grandpa's generation, my grandpa raised his family. He raised 4 kids on one income. It's very hard to do that today, especially if you're in the middle class. And so I think that's a great goal, and I'll bring up something controversial that people might disagree with me, but you know what happens when you flood this country with immigrants? You have
stagnation.
Well, yes, you lower wages. And I know that I'm saying a cardinal sin to the Wall Street Journal probably, but
the next thing you know, they're going to be writing op-eds about you, John.
Yeah,
you better watch out.
But if you, if you want better, stronger wages, the worst thing you can do is just start flooding the country with high levels of immigration. And so I think the governor is really key on that issue, especially if you have that goal of you want to have where one parent can work and raise enough money to support a family. But today that's very hard to do.
It is. I agree with that, John. There was the fourth bullet, which actually I think kind of is the end goal of all of that, or at least tries to sum it up. We want to be a country where young people feel they can develop the skills and values to build a decent life and contribute productively to their communities.
And that's one thing that he mentioned in his economic plan is this also is controversial, but establishing work requirements for entitlement programs like Medicaid.
Yeah.
And that sounds harsh, but but what we've seen is when some states that have this rule for a work requirement, it leads people out of poverty. And what happens when you leave people out of poverty? They have more dignity, more self-worth, and it gives them a whole new lease on life, I think. So I think that's very good. And we saw that in the 1990s with welfare reform, first at the state level, when you had governors like Tommy Thompson and Engler of Michigan that were doing state-based welfare reforms that were bringing people off their rolls back into work, and then the historic welfare reform that was negotiated between Gingrich and Clinton in the 1990s that reduced the rolls. And so, I think that's a good objective. I really like his idea of bringing back manufacturing, but again, I'd like the devil's in the details there. So I'd like to see more on that, especially, is he going to use the tariff? How is he going to encourage more manufacturing, or is it going to be through these strategic tax abatements?
Yeah. I actually would be very interested to see that as well. So there's a statement that sums all this up that I don't know if I'm comfortable with, though, here at the bottom. And this might tie it back to our conversation we had about trade a little bit, John, last week. The goal, this is sort of to sum up at the end, the goal of our Declaration of Economic Independence is simple. We win, they lose. The goal of global free trade.
if the thing is zero sum, then yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's where America First is absolutely right.
Well, it is a zero sum game because
is it though, John? I mean, I think that's where I want to get at.
Yeah, China is not playing to be an equal player in the world. They want to be leader. They want people, and I should say, they want nations to be dependent upon them. And the same thing, even our allies, Japan, many of the European countries, the European Union, look at their trade policies. They are enacting policies that benefit them first.
Yes.
And it's only the United States that has followed this free trade ideology for decades. I heard an analogy once where it's like we're playing strip poker and Uncle Sam is down to his boxer shorts and everyone else is in full winter clothing. And we're so beholden to this ideology of free markets that we're willing to do anything.
Yeah.
What did they say? You guys are football fans. They always said, what Vince Lombardi, he didn't say, I just want an equal playing field. I mean, he wanted to win. I mean, this is, and so it is. Yeah. I mean, these countries, they're out for blood.
Yeah. For those listeners out there, if you had John Hendrickson talking about football and strip poker on your bingo cards, you are a winner on today's episode of the ITR Live podcast. But
there's a great political cartoon I have in a book, and it shows Uncle Sam playing cards, and he has 4 aces, and across the cards it says protection.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate that, and I'm glad you brought that up, Chris. If it is a zero sum, if it's us versus them, then yes, I absolutely agree with that. But you know what? Even in an era, John, and we don't need to go too far down this again, where, let's say it's the early 1900s when we had a more protectionist economic policy in this country, a strong America that takes care of itself first, that doesn't mean the rest of the world loses. And a strong America can still be a positive trading partner.
Yes,
we will
absolutely.
still export goods and services.
Yeah.
We will still buy goods and services from other countries.
Yeah.
We will just do it on our terms and what benefits us the best. That doesn't mean that Canada cannot benefit from a strong America. And a strong America is what many parts of the world have relied on over the past century or more to help them when times got bad.
Yeah.
We were at the Hoover Library and saw what
Yeah.
America was able to do post World War I. That's a strong America that can do those things.
Our it was the United States manufacturing our steel that became the arsenal of democracy.
Right.
That defeated the Empire of Japan, defeated Nazi Germany, that saved Western Europe, that saved Asia from Japanese imperialism. It was that industry. What have we done today? We have outsourced everything where our defense has been hollowed out. And so we, this is where I think, certainly, as we were talking about in the last podcast, I would argue that a system of protectionism using tariffs does not mean you don't trade.
Right.
It simply means you look at, just like it should be in our foreign policy, how do we benefit our country first?
Yeah.
And how do we look out for our own people first, and not necessarily what's good for the globalists.
Well, I think that's right, John. I think that's where I land on it. And so that statement, and I don't want to be too critical of it because I think it's good that this plan is out here. And I love the tenor in which that is given, is that America is what comes first and not what benefits anybody else. It's about America and Americans, and American families, and American prosperity. That's what we're focused on, and I love that. I just thought it was good to kind of talk about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else has to lose, but if somebody's going to win, it needs to be America.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because right now, there's no mistake that China is playing to win. I mean, they are playing to be the global dominant power, and they want countries to be dependent upon them economically, and that should be a concern for everybody.
Yep. Well, good. I suspect there's going to be much more said on these issues as we progress through the rest of the presidential campaign. So I look forward to having those conversations here as well. So good. Gentlemen, it's good to be back. I'm glad
we're glad you're back.
I know you are, John.
So
good. You didn't sound like it about 28 minutes ago I was a little worried. But we got there.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Well, see, I'm from the north, so we're slow, and it takes us a while to get going. So.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, with that, that's all the time we got for today. Appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends. Check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on there as well and give us a positive review. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.